Well, if you're a normal person, you probably thought that CNN was just being woke back in the day when they used the headline of the fiery but mostly peaceful protests, right, when they were describing the George Floyd riots. But phrases like that might have come directly from a government agency. So here to take us down the rabbit hole is BlazeTV host Auron MacIntyre. So Auron, thanks so much for joining us here tonight. So let's start with getting into the community relations services, right? So how did this become the government agency that is pushing all the politics behind the Civil Rights Act?
So when the Civil Rights Act was created, Title 10 of the Civil Rights Act required there to be a community relations service, which went around and tried to smooth out problems between the different communities in the United States. In theory, that sounds great. You have some kind of tension break out. These people come from the government. They try to calm things down, smooth things over, build bridges. Who wouldn't want that? But in reality, what this service actually ended up doing was managing the expectations of different communities when it came to violence, especially when it came to violence between Black communities and white communities. Anytime that a white person might receive some level of violence from a minority, these people were deployed to control the story, to control the situation. They put lots of pressure on local media. They coordinated with law enforcement, and they even go to the extent of writing prepared statements in some cases for the victims' families, which they're then read in public. It's manipulating everything people know about race relations in the United States from top to bottom.
So, Auron, give us an example of this. You gave an example. There's an example from Lewiston, Maine, and a racially charged murder involving Somalis. What did the CRS, the government agency, do in that case?
Right. We had a situation where two Somali men killed a gentleman who lived in that city, and the CRS was there. They were deployed to make sure that, again, there was no backlash over this, that the victims' families were kept under control. One of the reasons that the CRS were so quick to respond to this particular incident is that they were actually already on the ground because they had been involved in deploying the Somalis, resettling them in that city from the beginning. So they were already there. They were already expecting tension between the local population and the new Somali population. They even expected the possibility of violence. So they already had the narrative ready. They already had the personnel on the ground. And as soon as what seems like a very predictable violence broke out, they were there to make sure that there was no backlash against the Somali community after the thing that they kind of predicted would happen actually occurred.
Okay, this blows the mind. It should blow the mind of every American. I just want to go over again what you just said, because this is extremely troubling, beyond even the wildest dreams of what many people thought was possible for the federal government. We are talking here about basically the Norm Macdonald meme, about Muslims. You know this one, where it'd be a shame if there was backlash against Muslims. That's why we don't want the violence to happen. I mean, that's the point of it. So here we have the federal government, a federal agency that's meant to help, implement the Civil Rights Act, that everyone's treated equal, helping Somalis come in, helping them protest maybe, or stirring them up. And then when two of them murder someone, they're coming in to help make sure there's no backlash against Somalis. Is that right?
That's right. And they've been doing this for decades. This is not some neutral organization, to be clear. This is a institution that is politically charged from its very beginning. It starts by training activists. It continues to train leftist activists to this day. It would threaten to pull the FCC licenses of TV stations that did not hire Black newscasters in an affirmative action style. They worked with different Black militant radicals in the 60s, some of whom were students of Saul Alinsky, in order to coordinate different riots, making sure that rioting was allowed to take place but didn't get so far out of control that would trigger backlash. And backlash is the key. In fact, the people who ran the organization admitted that the purpose of the organization was explicitly to prevent white America from having any backlash against any minority groups that might do violence against them. And at every one of these instances, these people have been on the ground explicitly looking on how to control, again, the law enforcement situation and the media situation, so that there isn't a awareness of the severity of many of these crimes.
So if your head isn't already exploding, and it probably should be by now, it gets even better because they are immune from FOIA requests. Is that correct? Like, how is this even possible that something's going on within the government and it's not CIA, it's not FBI. Like, how can we not FOIA these people and these groups?
Yeah, that's the amazing part, and that's how they have flown under the radar for so long. Under Title 10 of the Civil Rights Act, they receive a level of immunity that allows them to basically refuse most FOIA requests. You can only really get receipts for travel and that type of thing. They basically have an FBI level of confidentiality. They are able to have special privileges where they can avoid testimony in front of Congress and in courts. And really, it's amazing that a organization whose job is to be about community relations in theory, in fact, has to be insanely secretive. Even the notes that they take are destroyed and not entered into the public record. It's amazing to know what might have been lost just in this process, what secrets we'll never know because ultimately they weren't allowed to record them and no one was allowed to request them.
Okay, so this agency comes in and manipulates the narrative after riots and racially motivated attacks. It also possibly helps foment some of those things, or at least sets the conditions for them. What is their real goal? What do you think the real purpose of this organization, this part of the federal government is?
Well, we don't have to guess. The amazing thing is most of the stuff I'm telling you was written down in a book by the people who ran the organization. Yes, the government actually restricted our ability to know, but they were so proud about what they did that they actually went out and bragged about it. And they explicitly said that the purpose was to disrupt those lily white towns throughout the United States and punish them, let them know that ultimately they needed to integrate or they needed to become the model of diversity that the government wanted in the beginning. And that's really the sinister thing through all of this. There was a explicit effort to force a certain level of integration. Now, a lot of people support this, right, ultimately, but the fact that the government was engineering it and clandestinely in a way that no one could actually look into, it was not transparent in the slightest. The fact that they have involved themselves in the narrative manipulation of grieving parents after their child have died, making sure that they deliver specific speeches, downplaying any racial motivations and always talking about the virtue of the victim rather than why the action took place. This is a constant effort for people to not understand what is going on in their country. And that is something that absolutely should not be allowed in the United States of America.
Yeah, I mean, another way of looking at it is possibly to think, run the thought experiment. Is there a single example, I bet not, of them trying to integrate white or lighter skinned people in with darker skinned people anywhere in the U.S.?
Right.
And
they're looking to dismantle specific types of neighborhoods or to cover up specific types of crimes. They're not rushing in to get rid of the racial narrative when a white person kills a black person. In fact, we are amplifying that racial narrative. But when the roles are reversed, obviously the important thing to do is to get in there, diffuse the situation, remove any speculation about racial motivations, and pretend like there is no problem happening. Once again, not something that the government of the United States should be doing. You want to improve racial relationships? That makes perfect sense. You want to manipulate the media? You want to manipulate grieving families? You want to hide all this under a blanket of secrecy that no one can pierce? That's terrible.
Well, I guess some of the silver lining here is that the Trump administration is aware of this, and the latest budget proposal that they have is supposed to defund this part of the government. So what's the next step? Does Congress need to take more action? What do you want to see happen from here?
Yeah, obviously, it's great news that this was already on the Trump administration's radar, and it's been confirmed to me that, like you said, the budget is working to completely defund the Community Relations Service. But the one thing that we know is that anything that has been defunded can be refunded. That's why you want legislation, executive orders. These things are great, but they're not there in perpetuity. The next time someone comes in, they can just pick up the ball exactly where they left off. And so if we actually want to get rid of this, the only thing that can be done is either to amend or remove the Civil Rights Act. And the fact that the Civil Rights Act in Title 10 creates a organization like this should probably set off some alarm bells, as that isn't the only thing the civil rights does to kind of pervert the way in which our Constitution was supposed to work. A guy named Christopher Caldwell wrote a great book called The Age of Entitlement that outlined how the Civil Rights Act had basically become the second constitution of the United States, superseding the one that we have now and granting special privileges to certain parts of the population. Ultimately, I think we need to take a long, hard look at whether or not the Civil Rights Act should even continue to exist at this point. If conservatives truly believe, as I do, that the United States is no longer a racist country and that we don't need to worry about this kind of thing, why are we enabling this Soviet top-down manipulation of the population, creating these thought crime bureaus? It's like we have a KGB just to make sure that you think the right way and hear the right things about interracial crime in the United States. And I just don't think there's any reason for that to exist in a country where we pretend we're free.
Yeah, this is a very important topic. And I think for everyone in the audience to realize almost all of the DEI stuff, all the LGBTQ stuff, all the gender issues, all of this is now embedded in the entirety of American society legally because of the Civil Rights Act, right? So the HR regime, human resources, all the laws where everyone has to worry about what used to be called political correctness, right, is called wokeism now. All of this is a legal regime that originates with the Civil Rights Act. And I would echo your comments. Christopher Caldwell, who's a great guy, very thoughtful guy, outside of anyone's political boxes, really he wrote that book, and everyone should read it. It's really, really important. So let's delve into this a little bit more. Recently, Christopher Rufo, who I know is a guy that both of us respect immensely, he sort of said, look, it's a non-starter, political non-starter to talk about questioning the Civil Rights Act, but what we need to do is just get back to what Americans were sold. And to be fair, I think you agree with me on this, correct me if I'm wrong, Americans were sold in the 60s the idea that, look, the Civil Rights Act is just to make sure no one pays attention, right? No one discriminates. That's what's in all the fine print. No one discriminates against anyone based on race, and then they added in all these other factors that you can't discriminate on. So the stated purpose, obviously, when you read the text of this, is that everyone is treated equally. But of course, as you've pointed out, and many others point out, and Caldwell points out, that's not what happened. In fact, it made sure that we paid attention to these things and we treated people unequally. So Rufo, though, his point makes sense, right? His point is, well, it's kind of like a third rail. It's something that no one will really be able to understand if you turn against it. You know what the left will say: you're all a bunch of racists and misogynists and whatever, homophobes. But you made an argument on Twitter, and you make one consistently, that we have to go back and rethink it. So let me put the long-winded question this way. It's on its face, right? It appears that the Civil Rights Act really is about just treating people equally. That's what Americans wanted. They wanted this sort of colorblind society. So why not keep it and just strip away all the crap that's been added to it?
I think the main problem with that outlook, and ultimately, let me say, again, to praise the Trump administration on what they've been doing so far, Harmit Dillon over there is just doing an amazing job running the Civil Rights Office. She's actually trying to operate the Civil Rights Office as it's supposed to operate,
yes,
which is a great thing to see. And as long as we have someone like her in that position, then maybe it seems like it's all going to work out. But I think conservatives know that ultimately government programs always grow well beyond their intention. And that's exactly what happened with the Civil Rights Act. It was sold, as you pointed out, as a document of equality, something that would create a colorblind society that would allow Black Americans to ascend to the same level as the rest of America had. And there was a real racial problem at that time. And obviously people were looking for a solution. But it only took a few years before that entire document was completely warped. We ended up getting things like Griggs versus Duke Power, a Supreme Court decision that decided that if there's any difference in outcomes, it's de facto evidence of racism in the United States. And people don't realize that is still the law of the land today. There was a gas station chain that ended up running background checks on its employees, and it lost a civil rights suit from the United States government because more minorities had criminal records, and so they were being excluded from the hiring process. This is how our country currently runs, and I don't think there's any way to go ahead and extricate that without getting rid of the Civil Rights Act as we currently have it. Now, ultimately, I think the United States is a place where much of this has changed. I don't imagine a moment where Jim Crow is just going to rush back in if you remove the Civil Rights Act as it exists now. And, to the political feasibility of it, of course, Chris Rufo is right. This is a giant mountain to climb. But you know what? So is the repeal of Roe versus Wade. And ultimately, it matters whether or not our government is involved in this massive bureaucratic control of all relationships in the United States, as long as they think they will have some contact with race. We simply should not have something like this in our country. And if we leave it there, yeah, we can defund it. We can try to change what it does. But the next time another president's in, as soon as the Democrats win again, they're just going to reverse all that. So either we make the push and make the real changes in the long term, or we have to just assume we're going to win every single election, because otherwise all of this work will get undone.
And all of the people said amen. That is a mic drop to end everything here. And as Reagan would say, the closest thing to eternal life is a government program. Auron MacIntyre, great stuff. Thanks so much.